What would you do if you knew a secret that could save hundreds of lives, but speaking up could cost you everything? Kalani Brooks faced that choice at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. And what happened next would shake a billion-dollar empire to its core. It started with a piece of fabric, just silk, expensive Italian silk destined for Paris Fashion Week. But when her fingers touched it, Kailani's entire body went cold. Because she knew something no one else in that boardroom could see. Picture this: the 18th floor of Hawthorne Apparel headquarters in Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, 20 executives in designer suits debating marketing strategies and profit margins. And in the corner, invisible to all of them, a 27-year-old woman in a gray cleaning uniform pushing a mop cart. That was Kalani's world. The world of people nobody sees. She'd learned the unwritten rules. Fast, don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't exist louder than the hum of your vacuum cleaner. For 3 years, she'd been a ghost in this building, cleaning their offices, emptying their trash, listening to their meetings while they forgot she had ears. But Kalani had a secret of her own. Before her mother's death forced her to drop out of college, she'd studied 2 years of textile engineering and quality control. Her fingers had been trained to read fabric the way a detective reads evidence. And right now, those fingers were screaming that something was dangerously wrong. The fabric sample had slipped from an executive's hand during the heated meeting. Just an accident. Just a small piece of silk on the polished floor. Kalani bent down to pick it up, doing her job staying invisible. But the moment her skin made contact with that coating, every instinct in her body triggered an alarm. The texture was wrong. The chemical signature didn't match. The reflective properties were off by fractions most people would never notice. This wasn't the certified Italian supplier material they claimed it was. Someone had switched it. Or worse, counterfeit materials had infiltrated the supply chain. In her locker downstairs, her sister's college graduation photo smiled back at her. 4 years of tuition. All paid for by Kalani's invisible hands, scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets. One wrong move, one word out of place, and she'd lose this job. Her sister would lose everything Kalani had sacrificed for. So Kalani did what invisible people do. She placed the fabric back on the table, pretended she'd noticed nothing, started to walk away. As if her knowledge didn't matter. As if she didn't matter. But someone was watching. Margaret Lewis, 66 years old, 3 months from retirement, 30 years surviving corporate warfare, saw everything. She saw how Kalani's hand had recoiled from that fabric like it was burning. She saw the fear flash across the young woman's face. She saw the exact moment Kalani decided to stay silent, because Maggie had made that same choice once, 30 years ago, and she'd regretted it every single day since. What Kalani didn't know was that 3 months earlier, Maggie had flagged those exact same supplier irregularities. She'd written a detailed warning memo to the creative director, a memo that had disappeared without a trace. And now, watching this shy girl walk toward the door with her head down and her truth locked inside, Maggie Lewis made a decision. Some silences she knew weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. This is the inspirational story of what happens when one cleaning woman's conscience collides with a billion-dollar cover-up, and how the quietest voice in the room became the one that changed everything. Before we begin, I want to wish you a beautiful Christmas filled with warmth, love, and the quiet miracles that remind us we're never truly alone. Because what Kalani was about to discover would expose a conspiracy that went far deeper than anyone imagined. Kalani's shift didn't end until 2 in the morning. 5 hours to forget what her fingers had told her. She cleaned the executive washrooms, restocked hand towels that cost more than her weekly groceries, polished mirrors reflecting people who made decisions that rippled across continents. She was very good at being no one. But at 11:30, when the 18th floor emptied, Kalani found herself standing outside the quality assurance recycling area. Her hands were shaking. Don't. You have a job. Your sister has tuition due in 3 weeks. She opened the bin anyway. The shipment labels were there, batch codes from the same Italian supplier. But the industrial stamps, the certification marks verifying chemical safety standards, were offset by 0.3 millimeters. Most people hadn't studied textile engineering quality control until their eyes burned. Most people hadn't learned to read fabric the way others read faces. Cleaner. The voice behind her was sharp as a blade. Victor Sloan stood in the doorway, his expression somewhere between annoyance and contempt. Even at midnight, his suit was impeccable. "Don't touch anything that isn't trash." He said each word precisely calibrated to remind her of her place. "These are confidential materials." The shy girl inside her wanted to disappear. She stepped back, lowering her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just cleaning." He didn't smile. "So clean. Don't think." Kalani nodded, grabbed her cart, and moved toward the door. But as she passed him, she caught the faintest flicker in his eyes. Recognition. He knew she'd seen something. And he didn't care. Because what could a cleaning woman possibly do? What Kalani didn't see was Maggie Lewis stepping out from the adjacent office. The older woman had been reviewing retirement paperwork, but she'd heard every word. And she'd seen those labels 3 months ago. She'd flagged them, written a detailed memo to Victor about supplier inconsistencies. A memo that had disappeared into silence. Maggie found Kalani in the supply closet 20 minutes later, crying quietly into her hands. "Hey," Maggie said softly, kneeling despite her aging knees. "Hey now." Kalani looked up, mortified, wiping her face. "I'm fine. I'm sorry I shouldn't be. You saw something." It wasn't a question. Kalani's breath hitched, then so quietly. "The coding on the Paris samples. It doesn't match the batch certification standards. I think someone switched suppliers mid-production. Or worse." Something old and fierce flickered behind Maggie's eyes. "How do you know?" "I studied textile engineering 2 years before I..." Kalani's voice broke. "Before I had to leave school. And you're working night cleaning. My sister needed to finish college." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have looked. I don't have any right to..." "If you're sure about what you saw," Maggie interrupted gently, "then you have every right. You have a responsibility." Kalani laughed, bitter and broken. "To who Victor Sloan just told me to stop thinking. No one wants to hear from the cleaning staff about quality control failures." Graham Hawthorne might. The name landed between them like a stone in still water. Graham Hawthorne, CEO, 36 years old, running the family empire with an iron fist and a haunted look that never quite left his eyes. "He won't listen to me," Kalani whispered. "People like me don't get listened to." Maggie took Kalani's hand. Her grip was warm, steady. 30 years ago, I found a manufacturing defect that could have injured children," Maggie said quietly. "I was a junior quality tech. I reported it to my supervisor. He ignored me. So I went over his head. Nearly got fired for it." Kalani stared at her. "But I was right. 50,000 units got recalled before anyone got hurt." Maggie squeezed her hand. "The supervisor, he's long gone. And I'm still here. That's the inspirational truth they don't teach you. Doing the right thing costs something, but staying silent costs more." "What if I'm wrong?" The fear in Kalani's voice was raw. Then you apologize and move on. But what if you're right and you stay silent? Kalani thought of her mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion before her heart gave out at 51. She thought of her sister, who believed Kalani was happy cleaning offices. She thought of all the invisible people who knew things but never spoke, because speaking required the kind of visibility that could destroy you. "I can't just walk into the CEO's office," she said. "No," Maggie agreed. "But tomorrow there's a final review meeting. Graham always attends when Paris Fashion Week is involved. If there's even a whisper of another quality scandal, he'll want to know. He won't listen to me. Not alone." Maggie stood, offering her hand. "But I was the last quality lead before the major recall that nearly destroyed this company 10 years ago. Graham knows my name. If I vouch for you..." She let the possibility dangle. Kalani took the offered hand and stood on trembling legs. "If I'm wrong, I lose my job." "If you're right and stay silent," Maggie said gently, "you lose something harder to get back." In the fluorescent light of the supply closet surrounded by industrial cleaner and mop buckets, Kalani Brooks, the shy girl everyone overlooked, made a choice that would change everything. But neither woman knew that Victor Sloan had already made his own calculations, and silence was worth protecting at any cost. Tomorrow's meeting would force everyone to choose protect the truth or protect themselves. The morning meeting began at 9 sharp. Kalani had never seen the executive conference room during business hours. 12 department heads, tablets glowing, coffee in bone china cups. She stood by the wall in her gray uniform, invisible again. Except Maggie had positioned herself directly across from Graham Hawthorne's seat, and when their eyes met, she gave Kalani the smallest nod. Courage is just fear that said a prayer. Graham entered at 9:02 and the room's energy shifted. Dark suit, dark eyes, expression revealing nothing. "Status update," he said without sitting. "Paris Fashion Week launches in 6 days. I want confirmation that every element is flawless." Victor Sloan stood smoothly, activating the presentation. All quality control benchmarks exceeded. Supplier contracts locked. Marketing ready. His smile was confident. "We're golden, Graham." The screen showed fabric samples, timelines, projected revenue. Everything gleamed. Graham studied the numbers in silence. The numbers look fine. But my instinct says the market won't forgive another mistake. The temperature dropped. Another mistake. Everyone over 30 remembered. 10 years ago, a quality scandal nearly destroyed Hawthorne Apparel. Graham had spent a decade rebuilding what one oversight shattered. "We've triple-checked everything," Victor said, edge in his voice. "It's not second-guessing when it's happened before." Graham's tone could have frozen water. That's when Maggie spoke. "Graham, there may be something you should hear." Every head turned. Victor's expression went still. Graham's eyes found Maggie. "I'm listening." Maggie stood and turned to Kalani. "This is Kalani Brooks. She works night cleaning. She also studied 2 years of textile engineering before family circumstances required her to leave school. Yesterday evening, Kalani noticed something about the Paris line fabric samples, something that concerns her professionally." The room went silent. Not respectful silence, stunned, uncomfortable silence. Victor actually laughed. "Maggie, with all due respect..." "I'm not finished." Maggie's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "If she's wrong, I take full responsibility. If she's right, we listen." Kalani felt every eye land on her. Graham studied her for a long moment. "I'll listen. Once." Victor leaned back, arms crossed, wearing a slight smile. Kalani stepped forward on trembling legs. "If I'm wrong, I'll leave and never interrupt again." How generous. Victor murmured. Graham shot him a look that could have cut glass. She's speaking, you're not. Kalani moved to the table where the fabric samples lay. Her hands trembled as she picked up the Italian silk. This supplier code, Tessuti Rossi batch TR 447, certified for chemical safety compliance last month. Correct, Victor said impatiently. Top-tier supplier. We've used them for 3 years. The batch certification is correct. Kalani continued, her voice gaining strength. But this coating, the reflective finish, it doesn't match the chemical signature of TR 447 processing. How could you possibly know that? Victor's tone was dismissive. She placed the fabric under the overhead light, angling it carefully. The micro-reflective properties are inconsistent. The coating refracts light 0.2 degrees differently than certified Tessuti Rossi applications. You'd only notice if you'd studied their specific industrial processes. Silence. That could be normal variation, someone said uncertainly. It could be, Kalani agreed. But 3 months ago I saw similar labels in the quality recycling bins. The industrial safety stamps were offset. That's either a supplier equipment malfunction, which should have triggered automatic reporting, or someone substituted materials mid-production. Or counterfeit materials entered the supply chain. Victor stood abruptly. This is absurd. You're basing this on touching fabric. We have digital verification systems. Run the archived batch comparison. Graham interrupted, still looking at Kalani. If there were inconsistencies, the system would have logged them. He turned to his assistant. Pull the last quarter's quality flags for Tessuti Rossi. The young man's fingers flew across his tablet. Then his face changed. Sir, there were 3 automated flags, all related to certification stamp irregularities and chemical signature variations. Why wasn't I informed? Graham's voice dropped to dangerous calm. The flags were reviewed and cleared by Creative Director Sloan, sir, marked as acceptable tolerance variations. Every eye turned to Victor. His face had gone pale, but he recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Because they were acceptable variations. We can't halt production every time an automated system has a minor alert. Show me the data, Graham said. The assistant projected the files onto the main screen. Chemical analysis reports, supplier certifications, and they're flagged in yellow 3 separate automated warnings about coding inconsistencies. All cleared by Victor Sloan with a single notation within acceptable parameters. Proceed. Graham stared at the screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was empty of all emotion. Run a rapid comparison test. Pull samples from the archived TR 447 batch from 2 quarters ago before these flags started appearing. Compare the chemical signature to current samples. That will take at least an hour, Victor protested. Then we wait an hour. What they discovered in that hour would shatter everything they thought they knew. They waited in suffocating silence. Kalani had retreated to the wall, trying to disappear. Some executives scrolled through phones. Others whispered. Victor stood by the window, jaw tight, staring at the Manhattan skyline. Maggie sat perfectly still. When Kalani caught her eye, the older woman mouthed, "Breathe." Graham hadn't moved. He'd pulled up old files on his tablet, reading, "Remembering." 47 minutes later, the lab technician entered with an expression that said everything. Mr. Hawthorne, the comparison results are conclusive. Graham gestured for him to continue. The archived TR 447 samples from 6 months ago show a chemical coating signature consistent with Tessuti Rossi's certified process. The current samples match a completely different chemical profile. The base fabric is Tessuti Rossi. The coating is not. The room erupted in murmurs. That's impossible, Victor said, voice lacking conviction. The coating, the technician continued, matches lower-grade industrial applications used by manufacturers in Southeast Asian markets. Not unsafe, but not what we contracted for, and not what was certified. Graham closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the look on his face made Kalani's chest tighten. Someone substituted materials, Graham said quietly. The question is who and how far up it goes. Not yet. Graham's voice cut through suggestions to contact the supplier. First, we investigate internally. If there's supplier fraud, we handle it properly. But if this happened because of internal pressure, he looked directly at Victor, then we have a different problem. Victor's face flushed red. You can't possibly think I would deliberately. I don't know what to think yet. Graham interrupted. But I'm going to find out. He turned to his head of operations. Initiate a full internal review. I want every quality flag from the last year examined, every supplier communication, every approval override. Then he looked at Kalani, really looked at her. Thank you, he said simply. 2 words. But they landed in her chest like an earthquake. The internal investigation took 3 days. Kalani continued her night shifts, but everything felt different. Executives nodded as she passed. Human Resources had called her in not for termination, but a conversation about utilizing your skill set more appropriately. On the 3rd day, Maggie found her in the break room. They finished the investigation, Maggie said quietly. Kalani's appetite vanished. And Victor Sloan deliberately cleared those quality flags. The investigation found email chains between him and a middleman broker, pressuring him to cut material costs, to hit aggressive margin targets. Maggie's voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. He knew the coating had been substituted. He approved it anyway. Why would he do that? Because Victor convinced himself that a small quality compromise was worth the difference between a good quarter and a spectacular one. He thought no one would notice. People could have been hurt, Kalani whispered. If that coating had unknown chemical properties, I know. Silence. What happens to him? Graham suspended him immediately. The case has been forwarded to legal. There will likely be termination, possibly other consequences. Maggie squeezed Kalani's hand. You stopped it. Before it became another scandal. Before it destroyed lives. That evening, Graham Hawthorne requested to see Kalani in his office. She'd never been on the executive floor during business hours. Glass and steel, thick carpet. His assistant smiled. He's expecting you. Graham's office was surprisingly modest. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A single photo on his desk. A man who looked like an older version of Graham standing in front of the Hawthorne Apparel flagship store. Graham stood when she entered. Kalani, please sit. She perched on the edge of the chair, hands knotted. I wanted to speak with you personally, he began. First to thank you. What you did, what you risked, it saved this company from repeating the worst mistake in our history. I didn't do it for the company, Kalani said quietly. I did it because it was wrong. Something shifted in his expression. That's exactly why it mattered. He leaned forward. 10 years ago, my father was CEO. A quality control supervisor noticed irregularities in our children's line chemical exposure risks from counterfeit materials. She reported it to her manager. The manager buried it, claiming it was too expensive. A child was hospitalized. The story went national. My father resigned. We barely survived. Kalani's breath caught. I rebuilt this company on one promise: we would never ignore a warning again. We would never value profit over safety. We would listen. He met her eyes. And then we did it anyway. Because I trusted the wrong systems. I trusted titles and credentials and hierarchy. I forgot that intelligence and integrity don't require a corner office. Victor was your creative director, Kalani said softly. He had every credential. And you're a night cleaner with 2 years of textile engineering training. Graham's voice was quiet but intense. You saw what he deliberately ignored. You spoke up when staying silent would have been safer. Do you understand how rare that is? Kalani didn't know what to say. Graham pulled a folder from his desk. Human Resources has prepared an offer. We're creating a quality assurance specialist position. It would involve completing your textile engineering degree company sponsored while working part-time in our quality department under Maggie's mentorship. Full benefits. Salary commensurate with the role, not your current position. Kalani stared at the folder. I don't understand. I'm offering you a job, Graham said simply. The job you should have had 3 years ago if life hadn't interfered. Why? The word came out broken. I'm nobody. You're somebody who saved us from ourselves, Graham said quietly. That's not nobody. That's somebody we need. And in that moment, everything Kalani had believed about her place in the world began to crack open. Kalani walked out of Graham's office, clutching the folder. The hallway seemed endless. Her reflection in the glass walls showed a woman in a gray uniform carrying what might be a different future. She made it to the elevator before the tears came. Not sad tears. Not quite happy tears either. Something else, like a locked door inside her chest, finally opening, releasing 3 years of grief, hope, and exhaustion all at once. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Maggie was waiting. Of course she was. He told you, Maggie said, not a question. Kalani nodded, unable to speak. Come on. Maggie took her elbow gently. Let's get some air. They ended up in a small park 2 blocks from Hawthorne headquarters, sitting on a bench under trees showing early autumn colors. Office workers rushed past with coffee and phone calls, everyone hurrying toward something. I can't take it, Kalani said finally. Maggie turned to look at her. Why not? Because I don't deserve it. I just noticed something. Anyone with my training would have... But they didn't. Maggie interrupted gently. You were here. You noticed. You spoke. Those aren't small things, Kalani. My sister just got her first teaching job. I was going to help her with classroom supplies. If I go back to school even part-time, I won't be able to send her as much money. Have you asked her what she wants? Kalani looked up, startled. You've spent 3 years making yourself smaller so she could be bigger. That's love. That's sacrifice. But sweetheart, Maggie's voice went soft. She's standing on her own feet now. Maybe it's time you let yourself stand on yours. The words hit like a physical thing. I'm scared, Kalani admitted. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? Then you fail, Maggie said simply. And you get back up. That's how it works. They sat in silence, watching the city move around them. Graham asked why I didn't speak up sooner. Kalani said quietly. Why I waited. What did you tell him? That people like me are usually told not to. Kalani's voice wavered. He said people didn't miss me because I was small. They missed me because they weren't looking. Maggie's eyes shimmered. He's right. Is he just guilty that his company almost made the same mistake twice? Both things can be true, Maggie said. He's guilty because he should have built better systems. better ways for truth to travel upward regardless of who's speaking it. And you're valuable because you refuse to let an injustice pass, even when staying silent would have cost you nothing. A breeze moved through the park, carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts from a nearby cart. My mother used to say that courage is just fear that said a prayer, Kalani said softly. I think I finally understand what she meant. Maggie reached over and covered Kalani's hand with her own. I'm retiring in 3 months, Maggie said. But I've spent 30 years in quality assurance fighting to make sure the right voices get heard. I've been looking for someone to carry that forward, someone who understands that quality control isn't just about fabric and chemical signatures. It's about integrity. She squeezed Kalani's hand. I think I found her. Kalani looked at this woman who'd stood up for her when no one else would have, who'd seen her before she'd been brave enough to see herself. I'll take the job, she said quietly. I'll try. That's all anyone can do, Maggie said smiling. Try, and keep trying until trying becomes being. They sat together until the sun shifted, two women separated by decades and united by the simple, stubborn belief that doing the right thing still mattered even when, especially when no one was watching. 6 months later, the 18th floor looked exactly the same. Except Kalani wasn't pushing a cleaning cart anymore. She stood in the quality assurance department's main office reviewing a shipment analysis on her tablet. Her ID badge read Quality Assurance Specialist under a photo where she was actually smiling. 3 textile engineering courses completed. 2 more semesters to go. Kalani, a junior analyst, appeared in her doorway. The new fabric samples from the Milan supplier just arrived. Want me to run the standard verification, or do you want to check them first? 6 months ago, that question would have been impossible. Now it was Tuesday. I'll take a look, she said. But run the digital verification simultaneously. I want to see if my assessment matches the scanner profile. She walked to the materials verification room, a space she'd once cleaned but never entered, and picked up the first sample. Her fingers moved over the fabric with practiced precision, feeling for inconsistencies, checking the weight distribution. Perfect. Exactly as specified. The door opened behind her. She recognized Graham's footsteps, quiet and deliberate. Quality check, he asked. Always. She glanced over her shoulder. Did you need something? He held up a fabric sample. Second opinion. New sustainable line. The supplier swears it's revolutionary. I want to know if it's revolutionary or just expensive. Kalani took the sample, their fingers brushing briefly. She examined the fabric carefully. Biodegradable polymer coating over organic cotton base. Impressive tensile strength for the weight. Clean coating integration, no separation risks. She looked up. It's actually revolutionary. Also expensive. But worth it if you're targeting the eco-conscious luxury market. Graham smiled, a rare thing, but it had been happening more frequently. That's what I thought, but I wanted confirmation from someone I trust. The words settled between them, warm and solid. Your sister came by yesterday, Graham said. She was in the city for a teachers' conference. She wanted to see your office. Kalani's eyes widened. She did. She's proud of you. So proud she cried when I showed her the quality lab. He paused. There's a new Vietnamese restaurant 2 blocks from here. Maggie recommended it. She said you mentioned missing your mother's cooking. I thought if you're not busy, we could try it. Discuss the sustainable line. Or not discuss work at all. Graham Hawthorne's CEO was nervous. Actually nervous. I'd like that, she said softly. His shoulders relaxed. Good. That's good. The door opened again. Maggie appeared, retirement countdown at 2 weeks. Oh, good, you're both here. She handed Kalani a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Kalani, 30 years ago, I was ignored for speaking truth. I promised myself I'd make sure no one else was silenced the way I was. You reminded me why I stayed, why it mattered. Keep noticing, keep speaking. With love and pride, Maggie. Kalani looked up, tears streaming down her face. Maggie smiled. You saved more than a product line, sweetheart. You saved the idea that good people doing the right thing still matters. And in that moment, surrounded by people who saw her, truly saw her, Kalani Brooks finally understood that she'd never been invisible at all. She'd just been waiting for the right people to look.